election and the corruption scandal involving the state-controlled oil company Petrobras. Well, she was then suspended in May this year after the Senate voted to go ahead with the impeachment process. Well, for the latest, let's cross live now to the BBC's Julia Canero, who is in Brasilia for us. Julia, this is not surprising, of course, but it is still pretty shocking. Just how significant is this vote?
It's a very dramatic moment here in Brazil, Jane. We've been discussing this proceedings, the impeachment proceedings, 9 months ago, for 9 months since it was established by Congress, and now we've had the decisive moment. President Dilma Rousseff stripped of her mandate. It's the second time this happened since democracy was reestablished here in Brazil in 1985 after the military dictatorships. Brazil is still a young democracy after that period, and this is, of course, a moment of lots of gravity. We've seen senators celebrate inside Congress singing the national anthem, but part of the senators were also standing still and silent with lots of gravity in the air, and I think this reflects what's felt in the Brazilian population. We'll see many people out there celebrating today. We've had millions of people take to the streets over the past months to call for President Rousseff's impeachment, but there are also many other people who did not agree with the way this was going forward.
Is this the end of her career? Because she did win that second vote that could have barred her from politics for at least 8 years.
Yes, and this was a surprise. This was a decision made in today's session to dismember the vote and separate that decision and vote on that, whether she should lose her political rights or not, vote on that separately. And it turned out that she did manage to retain her political rights. But I think the blow is still the same. Having been stripped of her mandate, it's almost a bit of a consolation that she maintained her political rights. She is not someone who had a political career before being chosen as former President Lula as his appointed successor, and it wasn't really clear what she would do now, if she would still want to pursue the path of the political life, especially after going through this painful impeachment process. But now we're going to see the inauguration of the interim president made official now in the role, Michel Temer. He used to be the vice president of Dilma Rousseff and is of the PMDB, which is a conservative party here in Brazil. And he's been promising to put the economy back on track, Jane, which will probably include a series of austerity measures. He's been signaling that he's going to privatize lots of sectors of the economy, that he wants to raise the retirement age. So there will be a big policy shift now for Brazilians, and we'll have to follow. It's not clear yet if there will be political stability in this country anytime soon.
Well, Julia Canero with the very latest there in Brasilia. Thank you very much. Now, building a wall along America's southern border with Mexico is one of Donald Trump's most touted proposals. Now, the Republican presidential nominee is due to arrive shortly in Mexico for a meeting with the country's president, Enrique Peña Nieto. It comes just hours before he's due to make a long-anticipated speech on immigration. Andy Moore reports.
Some say Trump is softening his stance on the wall. This was his latest statement on the issue.
We are also going to secure our border and stop the drugs from pouring in and destroying our country.
We're gonna build the wall, folks. Don't worry about it.
In the past, his determination to build a wall paid for by Mexico has got the crowds going. He said it was needed to keep out undesirables.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Not surprisingly, the reaction from Mexico has been frosty, to say the least. The president said Trump's rhetoric was dangerous. That's how Mussolini got in, he said. That's how Hitler got in. They took advantage of a situation after an economic crisis. There's already a barrier along part of the Mexican border. This is near Tijuana. One former Mexican president said it was ridiculous to try to force Mexico to pay for an extension right along the frontier.
Is Trump going to steal that money? Take it away from them, as he's saying? How can any human being think like that? It's incredible. So it will not happen, forget it.
After his meeting in Mexico, Mr. Trump will be giving another big speech. Its subject, immigration. Andy Moore, BBC News.
Well, with me now to discuss this is the BBC's Catty Kay. Catty, of all the things Mr. Trump could be doing and all the places he could be, Mexico wouldn't be the top of the agenda, you would think. What on earth is he up to?
Well, Mr. Trump likes to surprise people, and this has certainly surprised everybody in the sort of political hierarchy. It's got him a lot of attention. It's getting him the headlines. We're talking about it. It's exactly what he likes, is everybody to be talking about himself. It potentially gives him a chance to look statesmanly, look presidential. This is his first meeting with a foreign leader since he announced his bid for the presidency. He could apologise. There's some speculation that he might apologise to the Mexicans for some of the more incendiary things he said, though not necessarily for his policies. And I guess the campaign is thinking that maybe with Hispanic voters it doesn't go down too badly, though I suspect it doesn't make much difference with voters here in America.
But what could possibly be in it for President Peña Nieto?
I mean, that's the most fascinating thing about this whole visit. Why on earth did he invite Donald Trump to come and visit him? Peña Nieto's approval ratings are in the 20s. He's one of the most unpopular people in Mexico. The only person who's more unpopular is Donald Trump. There are going to be protests in Mexico City around this visit. What does he get out of being seen with the person that Mexicans love to hate? So I'm not sure what's in it for Peña Nieto. He invited both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. I suspect he's sitting there, Jane, thinking, I wish he wasn't coming. This is just a headache for me and it doesn't look great.
Yeah, and there's no love lost between the two men either. They've traded insults on social media. We don't know what they're going to be talking about, do they? Because this is behind closed doors and Donald Trump has banned the press.
No, and I mean, the big issue for the Mexicans are the way that Donald Trump has spoken about Mexicans, calling them rapists and criminals who are crossing the border, and of course the wall, which he still says that he wants Mexicans to pay for. Now, Donald Trump is revising some of his issues around deporting the 11 million immigrants who are here illegally, many of whom are Mexicans. He's sort of fudging that one at the moment. We don't know quite what his policy is, but he's not backing down on that wall, and I can't believe he's going to go to Mexico City and say, oh, actually, that was a mistake after all.
And we could well be hearing about it later when he gets back to Arizona.
Exactly.
Catty Kay, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's have a quick look at some of the day's other news now. And a pregnant woman is among a new cluster of people diagnosed with Zika in Singapore, where there are now more than 100 cases. The government announced the first locally transmitted infection on Saturday, and the number of people diagnosed with the virus has since grown steadily. Pregnant women are most at risk because of Zika's potential to cause birth defects. South Korea says North Korea has executed its vice premier for education, who was spotted slouched in his chair during a meeting of parliament. Officials in Seoul claim Kim Jong-jin was killed by a firing squad, although his death is yet to be independently verified. A flight from Houston to London was forced to make an emergency landing in Ireland after 16 people were injured during what was described as severe and unexpected turbulence. 3 of those injured on board the United Airlines flight were children. Now, there is troubling news facing elephants in Africa. An exclusive report from the BBC reveals that the number living in the wild has fallen dramatically over the last decade. That's the finding of a wide-scale census of the animals carried out over 600,000 square miles of territory, stretching from Mali in West Africa across to Ethiopia and down to South Africa. The survey claims there are some 380,000 elephants living on the savannas in 18 African nations, but the numbers fell by around 30% between 2007 and 2014. In the last 2 years, that decline has accelerated, with herd sizes reducing by about 8% each year. Poaching for ivory is the main cause. Well, looking at individual countries, 60% of Tanzania's large herds have been lost in the last 5 years. And over the same time frame, the number of elephants in Mozambique has also more than halved. Alistair Leithhead has this report.
What other way to count a whole continent of elephants but from the air? For 2 years, they've been flying just 300 feet above Africa's savanna grasslands.
There are 5 out there, Mike.
It takes a keen eye or a camera to count each of the animals below. And sadly, their findings paint a depressing picture.
What's that? Is that another one?
In country after country, they have counted the carcasses.
This one's fresh.
This is the cost of the poachers and traffickers serving Asia's insatiable appetite for ivory. We've been flying along this floodplain that divides Namibia and Botswana, and all the way along here we've been seeing carcasses of elephants, some 4 months old, some less than a week old, and there's one just down here.
Clearly poaching, the face has been hacked away to get to the tusks.
Mike Chase led the census research. He found the worst hotspots of poaching are in Tanzania, Mozambique and Angola.
Each year we are losing nearly 30,000 elephants. And if this current rate continues, within 9 years, Africa could be left with half of the current estimate of African elephants.
Botswana has 40% of Africa's elephants, but amid the worst drought in decades, they're under increasing pressure. The only way to protect them is to know how many there are and where they go. And that means tranquilizing some to fit satellite tracking collars. It takes just a few minutes for the drugs to take effect. You've got to be careful the trunk's not blocked.
Well, this elephant is about 50 years old, given his size and the fact that the collar has to be really big to get that GPS tracker around his neck. They're trying to work as quickly as they can so they can get him round as soon as possible, but he'll be fine.
The quicker the whole process is done, the better. Then inject the antidote and retreat to a safe distance.
Okay, let's get out of here. There's one foot's been underneath him.
Yeah.
Go on. You can do it. Go on, you can do it. That's
there
it.
we go.
Well done.
This map illustrates the movements of 5 satellite-collared elephants.
The tracking data shows how elephants, the dots, used to travel across 5 countries. But now they stop at the border. They know it's too dangerous.
Elephants clearly have a cognitive ability to understand where they are threatened and where they are safe. And in this case, they are seeking refuge and sanctuary in Botswana, where they're well protected.
And is there room for them?
No.
Even without a drought, Botswana can't cope with so many elephants. Hunting has been banned here. Culling is even being discussed.
Currently, we are housing a lot of refugee elephants in Botswana. The biomass of elephants, in Botswana is so high per square kilometer that it puts a lot of pressure on the environment.
And the last true sanctuary for Africa's elephants is, for the first time, now firmly in the poachers' sights.
There were days on the Great Elephant Census when I thought, the only good I was doing was recording the disappearance of one of the most remarkable animals that walks this planet. But we have to be hopeful. At least, yeah.
The campaigns to stop the poachers and the traffickers across the continent continues. Alistair Leith at BBC News, Botswana.
Now, the Italian Coast Guard says it has coordinated the rescue of more than 10,000 people in the last few days off the coast of Libya. Today, thousands of these migrants have been landing in European ports along the Mediterranean coast, and the BBC's special correspondent Ed Thomas is in Sicily, where he sent this report.
To risk it all for a new life. Off the Libyan coast, there's been 70 rescue missions in just 3 days. Thousands, like this baby, are being pulled from smugglers' boats. A warning that this crisis isn't easing. These calm waters have given the desperate a chance to reach Europe. These men, women and children were picked up by the Italian Navy. They've been at sea for 2 days. There's relief, but also exhaustion after a journey like no other.
All they have are the clothes on their back. If you take a look at this group, they don't have any shoes. They're being given new pairs now. But these are the lucky ones because they've made it here. Nearly 3,000 have died in the crossing from Libya to Italy just this year alone.
The sick are treated first. Pictures taken, numbers given. It's hard to understand why anyone would do this. But then listen to Abel and Kelvin from Nigeria.
I saw a lot of killings. A lot of killings from the Boko Haram killing Christians.
I saw people die, people cut off people's head, and people are being raped on a daily basis.
Both say they're running from Islamist extremists, Boko Haram.
What would have happened to you if you stayed in Nigeria?
To me, if I was in Nigeria by now, I believe that I would have no longer be alive.
But not everyone is escaping war.
Are you happy?
Yes,
here in Italy?
Happy, yes, he's happy.
Saqib is from Pakistan. He wants work, a home and security.
Why should Europe, Italy give you a job? Why?
Is have problem, no have job Pakistan, no have money, I have problem Pakistan, no is everything.
10,000 have crossed this route since Sunday. People from Somalia, Eritrea, the Middle East and Bangladesh. With a European fleet waiting off the Libyan coast, some fear it's made life too easy for the smugglers, exploiting those who'll gamble their lives to begin again. Ed Thomas, BBC News, Sicily.
The latest there on the migrant crisis affecting Europe, and the British Prime Minister Theresa May has repeated her insistence that there will be no second referendum on Brexit. In a meeting to discuss developments since June's vote to leave the European Union, she told her colleagues they had a chance to forge a new role for Britain in the world. Now, as the BBC has reported, the actor and comedian Gene Wilder died earlier this week due to complications from Alzheimer's, a devastating disease that affects millions of people around the world. Well, now researchers are testing a new drug they hope could one day halt its progress. The BBC's Sophie Hutchinson reports.
A brain devastated by Alzheimer's, the normal electrical pathways which transmit information become blocked with plaque, cutting off thoughts and memories. It's an incurable disease, but now a new drug being trialled is giving some early signs of hope. And scientists at this centre in London who are about to take part in the next stage of the trial say it is exciting.
If this is successful, if we can show improvement or delay in symptom progression in people with Alzheimer's disease, that's a game changer. That changes everything about the way that we think about managing trials, managing treatments for people with Alzheimer's disease.
So what do we know about how effective this drug appears to be? These are the scans of patients at the start of the trial of the drug called aducanumab. The red areas are a build-up of damaging, sticky proteins called beta-amyloid, characteristic of Alzheimer's patients. And look at the same 4 patient scans after a year of treatment. No change in the placebo patient who didn't get the drug. But the higher the dose, the less red you can see, which is the protein being reduced. So what's happening? Well, beta-amyloid causes problems because it builds up in clumps called plaques around the neurons in the brain, blocking the connections and causing them to die. The drug is thought to work by marking the plaques. This alerts the body's immune system so that it can target and destroy them. The drug is unlikely to repair actual damage to the brain, but the hope is it might stop the disease from progressing. That's something Susan Jonas would welcome. She underwent the painful experience of watching her mother's slow mental decline as Alzheimer's took hold.
My friend who came every day, she found her one morning sitting on the sofa in front of the television, which wasn't something she watched very much. But she was still dressed, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and she hadn't been to bed, and because she'd sort of forgotten.
Alzheimer's research is littered with failed drugs that looked similarly promising early on. If successful, this drug would be the first treatment to stop the disease. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
Desperately needed hope for Alzheimer's sufferers there. Now, the BBC Pop-Up is back, this time in Russia, to report on stories suggested by you, the viewers. This time, the team set off on a 31-hour train journey on the famous Trans-Siberian Railway, giving them plenty of time to speak with fellow passengers. The topic of the conversation, I'm afraid there's no escaping it, the US presidential election, and in particular, the Republican nominee, Donald Trump.
So we are at Kazansky train station here in Moscow, and we are about to hop on the train for some reason. What are we doing, Emma?
We're about to get on a 31-hour train journey taking us across Russia to go on the Trans-Siberian Railway.
Транссибирская же магистраль еще можно ее назвать Великий Сибирский путь. Длина ее от Москвы до Владивостока 9822 километра.
So, having recently flown in from the US, where there is a heated presidential election going on, I would be curious what Russian passengers on board this train think about the United States right now, and maybe more specifically, think about Donald Trump.
США хочет, это на мой взгляд так, США хочет подчинить все, то есть весь мир под себя. США как бы выгодно, что в России была слабая страна, чтобы доставляла газ, нефть.
Он очень богатый человек, очень богатый. То есть он мог сделать себя полностью идеальным, правильно? И меня вот всегда интересовал вопрос, почему у него на голове такой беспорядок, безобразие.
Про Трампа. Про Трампа очень много смешных видеороликов в YouTube. Да, я смотрю, но это просто стендап актер, который просто это делает для того, чтобы было шоу.
Вот я говорю, я была на Украине 4,5 месяца, да? И там все против, все, потому что вся вот эта катавасия, которая творится сейчас на Украине, это все из-за США.
Во-первых, отношения, к политике отношения никакого не имею, вот, а народ там доброжелательный, вот как с кем я общалась.
Владимир Владимирович сказал, Путин это яркая личность. Правда, мне его высказывание тоже понравилось. А почему бы и не с Россией как бы сотрудничать? Представляете, что мы могли сделать с терроризмом вместе?
Я как-то в этом участие не принимаю. То есть мне без разницы. По-честному, я и в наших тоже выборах не принимаю участие, потому что считаю, что у нас ничего мне это не изменит, там, допустим, мой голос.
The view there of Donald Trump in Russia. And we do have some breaking news that Donald Trump has now landed in Mexico for that extraordinary meeting with the Mexican President Peña Nieto. That's it from the programme. Next we have the weather, but for now, from me, Jane O'Brien and the rest of the team, goodbye.